and welcome back to another episode of the Ventura Voices podcast. Today we are diving into wildfire prevention. This topic hits home for a lot of us in Ventura, and recently I know a lot of people across Southern California have been affected by wildfires. So today we are joined by two experts. We have Fire Marshal Brett Reed here from the Ventura Fire Department and Executive Director for the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council, Stephen Watson. I'm going to send it over to you, Brett, to quickly introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Brett Reed. I'm the Fire Marshal for the City of Ventura Fire Department. I've been Fire Marshal for about 3 years now, and I was hired as a fire prevention specialist in 2019 with the City of Ventura, and before working for Ventura Fire, I worked for Mammoth Lakes Fire Department in the City of Mammoth Lakes. Which is really where I got started in wildfire prevention, learning about defensible space. I was a wildland firefighter, and so when I came down to Ventura right after the Thomas fire, this all really hit home for me.
Great. Stephen?
My name's Stephen Watson, Executive Director at Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council. I've been at the Fire Safe Council for about 4 years now, and we've launched a number of new programs within that time. So I've had the experience of going through all of these new programs, learning all about wildfire safety as it pertains to the community, the homeowners, and what everyone can do to prepare themselves for the next big wildfire.
Yeah, and real quick, before we get started, Stephen, can you quickly outline for us what the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council is?
Great question. So, for those of you who haven't heard of a Fire Safe Council, essentially we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we meet the needs of wildfire safety in our community. And Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council serves the entire county, and Ventura included. So we provide a number of free programs and services to the residents and communities.
Perfect. I guess we're going to dive into some of that today. So to get started, let's start with the basics, defensible space. Defensible space is often referred to as a home's first line of defense against wildfire. Brett, can you outline for us what it is and why homeowners should be aware of their defensible space?
Correct. So defensible space is that area around a structure. It is defined as from the structure to 100 feet or to the property line that surrounds a structure. And there's really two zones in that space. Zone 1 is from the structure to 30 feet out, which is really where we're trying to get the most fuel reduction happening. And then from 30 feet to the property line or out to the 100 feet, which is a little more lean, can be a little more clean, and not as intense as far as the fuel reduction goes. But the idea is to keep a wildfire from getting to the structure or a structure fire getting into the vegetation and expanding outward. And it gives our firefighters more room around a structure to be able to work and to be able to fight a fire should that structure catch on fire.
Yes, so when you say fuel reduction, for someone who's not well versed in fire prevention, what is fuel reduction?
Fuel reduction is removing the amount of vegetation around a structure. So there's certain standards that the fire department enforces, and a lot of it has to do with limbing up trees, removing ground fuels, creating separation between shrubs and bushes, removing leaf litter from roofs, keeping your gutters clean. Anywhere where a spark or an ember can get into the vegetation and start and create a fire that could ignite the structure.
So when done well, having a defensible space can also just look like good landscaping and home maintenance.
100%. Yeah, it really does just improve the look of a structure.
Great. And then, Stephen, I know that there is a new state law kind of coming into effect in the next few years. I don't know the exact name of it, but it kind of is loosely referred to as Zone 0. Can you kind of dive into what Zone 0 is and how it might affect our residents?
Yeah, sure. So just stepping back for a second, the thing that I like to think about is when we're talking about defensible space, when we're talking about home hardening, we're looking at pathways for the fire to come into your property. So we heard the fire marshal talk about spacing and distance and stopping the fire from getting to your property. This zone 0 is what's seen as the most critical right now. All the science and research is pointing toward zone 0 as being the area where homeowners can do the most bang for their buck, essentially, right? The work that can be done in there will stop the fire from entering into their home. It will stop fire from igniting that has radiant heat or direct flame right onto their property. If you think about it just logically, let's talk about a fence, like a wooden fence that's going from outside of your structure into your property, into that first 5 feet, which is the zone 0, and touching your home. So that's a pathway, right? The fire is going to creep all the way along that fence, right up and then touch your structure because that wooden fence catches. And if that first 5 feet is not wood, but maybe it's a metal gate instead, it's stopping that pathway. So that's what we talk about when we're talking about zone 0, is trying to reduce or remove any combustible material or vegetation in that 5 feet.
Right. So that sounds kind of big and scary if you think about trying to remove everything that's combustible in the first 5 feet surrounding your home. That is not a law that has gone into effect yet, but it will in the next few years for existing structures. Is there anything that your team is working on now to educate residents on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're looking at some zone 0 campaigns, educational campaigns. Any of our workshops include this component as well, because as you said, it's not here yet. It will come down from the state for new construction first, and then a few years after that will be existing structures. There's still not exact determinations on what that's going to look like, so I don't want to spread any misinformation that everything's got to go, but for the most part, that's where they're looking at right now. And what we're doing at this stage is we have free home assessments, right, where we can send someone out to their property, walk around with them, identify vulnerabilities, even in that first 5 feet, give them some tips or ideas of what they can do to reduce the wildfire risk. Furthermore, with us knowing that something is coming down from the state, if you're going to retrofit your first 5 feet anyways, why waste the money on something that you might have to remove in the future, right? If you can think about it way in advance, it's going to save you money in the long run and make your home safer.
Yeah, great, thank you. So on that topic, let's talk about the Fire Hazard Reduction Program. Brett, FHRP, as you'll often hear it referred to, is a program run by the fire department where we kind of send out annual notices to 6,200 properties in Ventura's hillside primarily, and we kind of let them know that, hey, your property is in a fire hazard severity zone. You face certain risks being in these zones. Can you kind of outline what that program is, especially for people who've not heard of it or who are not part of it?
Sure. So I like to think of our fire hazard reduction program as kind of 3 prongs. One is the enforcement of defensible space regulations. Second is doing fuel reduction work throughout the city in collaboration with the Fire Safe Council, with our Parks and Rec department, other departments throughout the city, doing weed abatement and all of that kind of work. And then the third prong is really education, and this being part of that as well. Just getting out, letting the public know what the hazards are, what they can do to better help defend their structures.
So in Ventura, I know the fire department sends out annual notices to homeowners who are in high fire hazard areas. Who are the homeowners that are most affected?
Correct. So we send out about 6,200 annual mailers a year advising residents if their home is in a high or very high fire severity zone. And with that comes the regulations that we're going to be enforcing, letting them know that our inspection programs start on June 1st and that they need to prepare for those inspections and start preparing their home for the fire season coming up.
So come June 1st, when our fire inspectors are out there meeting homeowners, inspecting properties, what happens if someone is in violation?
The first thing, our inspectors are going to send the property owner a notice and just identify what the item is that the inspector identified and what it is that needs to be corrected.
So at the end of the day, although we lead with education, enforcement is a part of the puzzle for the fire department.
It is a part of the puzzle, and we do have a process that we can get to enforcement, but first part is really education and compliance, and getting a homeowner into compliance with the regulations. And if we're having a hard time with compliance, then we can get into enforcement.
Great. Stephen, from your side of things, what are some simple, low-cost ways that homeowners can help improve their defensible space, whether or not they're part of the fire hazard reduction program? I know you had already mentioned home wildfire assessments. What are some other programs that your team offers to help kind of lessen the burden on residents?
Well, first of all, thankfully, we have the fire department for the enforcers, so we don't have to be the ones going out there and slapping wrists. So most people want us on their property because we're not gonna give them any sort of citation. We're purely educational. You asked some of the low-cost, kind of low-hanging fruit that people can do for defensible space.
The small, easy things that help safeguard their property without spending 10 grand.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the biggest major things is just maintenance. You know, that's something that is so crucial and important. Just cleaning up dead leaf litter, you know, cleaning stuff out of your gutters, trimming back your trees a little bit. There's all sorts of guidelines and requirements on the length, the distance, the separation. But if you're maintaining your vegetation, that's huge. You know, the biggest thing for embers that they're going to catch onto and burn and ignite is that dead vegetation that's flammable, right? If you want to go one step further, then we talk about spacing, you know, maintaining that space, using native plants, using plants that are drought friendly, and furthermore, ones that may not require as much maintenance may make your lives a little easier. If you're thinking about redoing your landscaping at some point, be thinking about the types of vegetation that will be easier to maintain over a long period of time, or more drought tolerant, fire safe plants and vegetation will really make a big difference in the long run.
So you mentioned embers kind of catching on vegetation that could be on your property. We know that embers can travel far beyond flame, up to miles even. On that topic, what is home hardening? What does it mean if someone wants to harden their home and protect themselves against flying embers or radiant heat or some of those things that isn't just flame on property?
Sure, I'll take a stab at this one.
Yeah.
So home hardening is different from defensible space because defensible space is first stopping the pathway of fire coming to your property, right? Home hardening is more about maintaining, changing, retrofitting the structure of your property to stop embers from getting into your home, to stop direct flame from impacting your home and igniting the home. One very quick example of that would be just the vents. The vents on your property, if they're ember resistant, they're gonna stop embers that come for miles. We saw in the mountain fire, it was almost 3 miles that these embers traveled, right? And as such, these embers can't fit in certain type of mesh screening. If it's 1/8 or 1/16, the embers won't be able to get through and ignite inside your attic or other areas in your home, which is one of the biggest reasons why a home will burn down in a wildfire, is those embers intruding.
Great, thank you. While I have both of you and we're talking about defensible space and home hardening, in your experience or in your team's experience, are there any particularly scary things you've seen, any horrifying properties that are just totally overrun with junipers or some of those plants that make a fire marshal scream?
I don't want to get specific and point out specific homeowners.
Don't give us a property, but in general, what is something
in general,
that is
yes.
frightening?
See, you mentioned junipers. Junipers are extremely flammable and tend to carry a lot of dead wood on the interior. Also, bougainvillea. Bougainvillea is one that, while they're beautiful, produce a lot of flowers, have a lot of greenery, The interior is just dead wood. And so they also will have a high oil content and be very flammable. Again, what really I would like to get out to the community is, as Stephen said, really being smart with the type of vegetation that you're planting, what you're using in your landscape, how you design your landscape, and keeping hedgerows low, separate, creating space between certain shrubs, etc., and creating a non-continuous fuel source.
One thing that comes to mind for me in mentioning kind of scary plants, not a plant, but I know you've talked with me a lot about, what is it called, gorilla hair?
Gorilla mulch.
Gorilla mulch, gorilla hair mulch.
Good point. And so,
rather than using a flammable mulch like that,
correct.
What are some easy things people can replace that with?
Easy things to use instead of combustible mulch is just pea gravel.
Just rocks.
Rocks, decomposed granite, compost, things of that nature are going to be far less flammable than the gorilla hair mulch, the bark mulch, any type of mulch. And you know, we talked a little bit about the Zone Zero. The fire department does currently have what I refer to as a modified Zone Zero, which means for new construction, we don't allow any combustible mulch within 5 feet. Very low growing plants, no greater than 2 feet in height. And so we're really moving towards that Zone Zero.
So would you say Ventura is kind of ahead of the curve?
In a lot of respects, yes. I think Ventura County as a whole is ahead of the curve. And, you know, the Ventura County Fire Department has really spearheaded a lot of the programs that we see here in the city.
Stephen, do you have an example to add?
Well, apart from our assessors talking about rattlesnakes or potato bugs, I assume you're talking about horrifying stories about
in terms of
wildfire
vegetation,
safety,
yes.
Right? Well, Brett, how do you feel about palm trees?
Well, palm trees can be a significant problem, especially poorly maintained palm trees, where you have the dead fronds coming down. We talked about embers, and if an ember cast gets into a palm tree and ignites the dead hanging fronds, that's where those embers can be cast for miles.
So did you see a property with 100 palm trees on it?
Well, interestingly enough, and I think this is kind of cool, but in a wildfire safety perspective, not quite so cool. We had someone who was all about palm frond art, right? So these dead
like
palm
sculptures?
fronds, just tying them up together, making little art pieces out of it, and just hanging it all around their property. And so if we're talking about palm fronds that are dried, dead, attached to the structure, that's probably about as horrifying as it gets when it comes to wildfire safety.
That's a bit of a problem, I'd agree. Yeah.
A bit of a problem. So to shift gears a little bit, let's talk about neighbors helping neighbors. Firewise USA is a program run through the National Fire Protection Association, and it's a grassroots, voluntary type of program. Stephen, I know that your team does a lot of work in helping neighborhoods become Firewise. Can you kind of outline for us what Firewise USA is?
Yeah, absolutely. Firewise USA, it's nationally recognized program by NFPA, as you mentioned, and CAL FIRE in California oversees it as well. Our organization assists residents and communities with this process. And the whole point and purpose of a Firewise USA recognition or program is to band together as a community to address wildfire safety in your neighborhood, in your community. And what that looks like is there are a number of steps that the communities go through in order to receive that recognition. Our organization and the fire department as well helps out with some of those processes and steps to becoming recognized. For example, there will be a risk assessment of their neighborhood and community, followed by an action plan of the steps that they're going to be doing year 1, year 2, year 3. right? And
to further improve
to further improve wildfire safety. One example could be in the risk assessment, they've identified a barranca that's really overgrown, and then in the action plan, they've looked at year one, we're going to work with the Fire Safe Council to seek funding to address that barranca, right? Maybe reduce the flammable vegetation, do some fuels treatment in that area. Right. So that's one particular example. And if I can add on to why it's important, it's important because what we're seeing in these fires, in Thomas Fire, Mountain Fire, Eaton, Palisades, the neighborhoods and the communities are becoming the fuel, right? It's no longer a wildfire. When it comes into the communities, it's what's called urban conflagration. That's where one home ignites, it goes to another, and it's just a domino effect. And so we know that it has to be a community effort. We can't just have one home safe here, one home safe here. We've all got to be in it together.
So it's kind of hammering home the point that fires don't stop at property lines.
Right.
If you and your neighbors, and on a larger scale, a larger neighborhood, all are partaking in these types of home hardening, defensible space, other safety measures, then your whole neighborhood is way safer than if people kind of piecemeal who does what. And
the firefighters are safer too. You're giving them a better chance at stopping the fire.
So locally, do we have anyone in Ventura who has become Firewise? Brett, do you want to maybe speak to that?
Sure. The Ondolando community became recognized as a Firewise community approximately 2 years ago now. So it's been great working with them, seeing the progress that they've made.
In the process of becoming Firewise, I know it takes a lot of work, a lot of coordination, a lot of meetings with neighbors. What are the benefits that we see?
Well, there are a number of benefits, and if wildfire safety isn't enough of a benefit for some people, there are insurance discounts that can come and are attached to Firewise recognition. Department of Insurance requires insurance providers to take that into account when doing their rates. Same with home hardening measures as well. I'll say from our perspective, the Fire Safe Council, we've seen a wide range of what that looks like, anywhere from 0.5% reduction on their insurance premium to, we had one community mention 32% reduction because they switched to a different provider and got a much lower rate because they were Firewise recognized. We had some communities that were just happy to keep their insurance because of having that Firewise recognition. Right. So it really is all over. Insurance is a bit volatile right now, so I don't want to promise or guarantee anything, but they are supposed to be doing these discounts. So the one thing that I'll say is for residents to advocate for yourself and talk to your insurance providers, your broker, when doing home hardening measures and being Firewise.
So at the end of the day, a benefit through insurance is great, but like you mentioned, you're making these improvements to your properties, and you are going to be that much safer if a wildfire were to hit Ventura.
I'll also add, if I may,
yeah,
that other benefits that we've seen are people just getting to know their neighbors. You'd be surprised at how many people don't know their next door neighbor, and after going through this whole process, so many of them have been grateful just to have that connection, that partnership, that neighborhood. In the Ondolando community, they have a Ready Your Neighborhood program where they're getting to know everyone. They're forming groups. They're knowing who needs more help in a wildfire and kind of really being a model for what a Firewise community should look like.
And then on that note, you get to then be looking out for your neighbor on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
Maybe you're house sitting, you're watching for strange cars in the neighborhood, you have each other's phone numbers, you text each other little updates. So beyond a national recognition, locally there are some major benefits to just knowing your neighbors.
I heard a resident refer to it as neighborhood watch for wildfires. And I thought that was a great way to address it.
It's so great to know that a few motivated residents can really make a larger change.
Oh, yeah. And I'm going to chime in here again about another benefit coming from our organization that is really unique to Ventura County, which we're excited about. We're constantly seeking additional funding. When a community becomes recognized, we actually have little funding requests that communities can submit to us, and we take off some of the services or actions in their 3-year action plan. The last chipping event in Ondolando, which was just last month, it was, I think, 198 cubic yards of vegetation removed with the help of the community and them being involved. Because they're part of a Firewise community, they can apply for this type of help and this assistance, which we can then provide based on their action plan.
Incredible. So kind of circling back around to fire hazard severity zones, kind of the buzz of the town right now is the new draft fire hazard severity zone maps released by the state, by CAL FIRE. Those are draft maps that have not yet been implemented in Ventura, but what does that mean for our residents? These new maps have been released. Brett, can you kind of give us an update about what those are and why residents should be on the lookout right now?
Sure. So CAL FIRE recently revisited their maps. It has been since the last map the city has adopted was released in 2007. And I think the last time the maps in their entirety were released was in 2012.
So it's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
A lot has happened.
And a lot has happened. And so CAL FIRE recently revisited the maps throughout the state of California. And they have been updating those areas that are designated as a fire hazard severity zone. And those areas they include the moderate, high, and very high fire severity zones. Depending on where a property lands, depends on what the regulations and requirements will be for that particular structure.
So in Ventura, let's say you are currently in a high fire hazard severity zone. With a map update, you could then be redesignated as either very high or moderate, depending on where you live and other risk factors that come into play.
Correct. And so yes, it's very possible that there is a property that's currently unzoned that could conceivably become in the high fire severity zone.
So part of this process is asking for public feedback, providing feedback of our own, and some of the chatter that we've heard is that people are concerned that these maps will affect their insurance. Do either of you guys have some information to add on that topic?
Sure, I understand the concern. However, Stephen mentioned the Insurance Commission earlier, and part of the Insurance Commission's directives is that the insurance companies are not allowed to take these fire hazard severity zone designations into account. They do use a lot of the same information that goes into producing the maps, but the maps themselves and whether you are identified in a fire hazard severity zone or not should have little to no impact on your insurance.
So for anyone who wants to really dive deep on these maps, even review some FAQs related to insurance, can visit our website at venturacityfire.com. So as we wrap up, Brett, Stephen, you guys have both been in this field for a while. What keeps you both motivated to do the work, provide an incredible public service, continually educate the public? What keeps you motivated?
Does spending more time with Brett count?
Yes.
Okay, great. No, in
all, like each other?
In all seriousness, we do have great partnerships with fire departments, all the other agencies. We have a Ventura County Wildfire Collaborative that works seamlessly to provide services to everyone in the county. But for me personally, I would say it's the fact that there's hope and that there's something that we can do and communities can do, and seeing that shift over the years, seeing that involvement happen firsthand. I had a resident come up to me thanking us for assessing their property, and they did the work, and their home survived in the mountain fire because of the work that they did. And that's just incredible.
I mean, stories like that give me goosebumps.
Right.
So I can't even imagine how your team feels knowing the impact that's being made.
Right. And being able to provide services to people who couldn't otherwise afford it or do the work is really, really meaningful for us.
Yeah. Brett, how do you stay motivated?
I think as Stephen mentioned, it's doing the work with the community, understanding that the work that we're doing has direct impacts, that this has been proven to be effective. The two biggest things that you can do to protect your home in a wildfire is defensible space and home hardening. And trying to get that message out, hoping that people understand it and can make a difference. And whether it's one resident, like Stephen mentioned, that their home is saved by the work that we do, then that's what keeps me motivated.
And it's pretty awesome to know. I know that our firefighters, boots on the ground, do a lot of great work in suppression efforts, but fire prevention really leads the way. Hopefully, the work that you guys are doing and the work that our residents are doing makes it so our firefighters don't even have to respond.
Absolutely, and that's the hope, and everything that we do in the fire prevention division is keeping our first responders in mind, whether it's access, water supply, and just limiting the impact when or if an incident does happen.
So before we wrap up, I want to just throw a quick surprise question at you guys. What is one fire prevention myth you would love to bust? Now is the time to bust it.
Tough one. I guess the first one I'll say is, no matter what I say to your neighbor, I can't convince them to do the work on their property. In all seriousness, I think I'll say that we often have people who call in saying, I'm not in a high fire severity zone, I'm not at risk. Yeah. And the unfortunate truth is that the fires can spread into the communities, into the neighborhoods, beyond the fire maps that CAL FIRE has put out. If you'll look at this new one, we'll see Ondolando community has a little chunk cut out where there's parts of Ondolando community not in the fire severity zone, even though it was an area that was devastated by the Thomas Fire. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one that I would like to bust, but hopefully not panic everyone. But yeah.
Great. Brett?
I'd say a myth that I'd like to bust is that fire prevention, our job is actually preventing fires. I think it's more community risk reduction, and we're more focused on reducing the potential risk to the community as a whole than we are actually trying to actively prevent fires from happening in the first place.
That's a great one. Thank you.
I think another myth I would say is many people are very, very, very focused on vegetation beyond 100 feet of their property. They want everything cleared out, thinking that it will be the magical cure for wildfire safety. But we don't want to be clearing 2-3 miles of vegetation because we know embers can go that far. So the real myth, I suppose, is focus inward, focus on your home, your structure, home hardening, your property, and that will make a big difference if everyone's on board.
Stephen, Brett, thank you both for joining us today to share the latest and greatest in fire prevention. Your time and expertise are so valuable, and I really appreciate you joining us. To everyone listening at home, please take action. Please talk to your neighbors, connect with the Fire Safe Council. We talked about a lot of great resources in this episode, and we will be sure to link everything in our show notes. We'll see you next time.